Hi, my name is Jenny Lauren Dowden for Conduit News. Today we have founder and president of the Family Council, Jerry Cox, joining us. Hi.
So good to be with you. Always enjoy being on your program.
Well, we really appreciate you and all of the work that Family Council does. I want to talk to you about a recent ruling from the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals regarding the SAFE Act. Talk to us about that, if you would.
Well, many people may be aware that in 2021, the Arkansas General Assembly passed the first law of this kind in the nation. And it's very simple. It just says that you cannot do gender reassignment procedures, including drugs or surgeries, to change people into the opposite sex if they are a minor, if they're under age 21. So you can't be doing that to children. And of course, that's common sense. I think most people understand that. But for some reason, the governor vetoed that bill after the legislature passed it. Legislature overrode the veto. Looked like the bill was going to become law, and lo and behold, it did. But the ACLU stepped up and they went to federal court and they said people ought to be able to change little boys into girls and little girls into boys. Yeah. And so they filed a suit in federal court, and now the law has been enjoined while it is being litigated in federal court, Judge Moody's court here in Little Rock. And so we're going to have to let the legal system grind along while it's still legal then to do this awful thing to little boys and girls here in Arkansas.
And that's what I was going to ask you next. That is, so these gender reassignment surgeries on minors, on children, are happening right now in Arkansas.
The Children's Hospital here in Little Rock advertises a gender clinic. Now, that's just code for, hey, if your child has gender dysphoria, bring them in. And we have good reason to believe that they're actually administering puberty blockers and hormones to children there. Don't have any evidence that they're actually removing body parts. Although, as drastic as that sounds, with this law enjoined, Arkansas has no law to prevent that. Now, there might be other laws that would step in there and say, well, that's beyond the standard of care and all that. But this is spooky stuff. And it becomes such a political thing out there. It's trendy now to say, oh, my child is transgender or my child is transitioning. And the truth is, from the psychiatrists that we have worked with, they say, yeah, there are kids with gender dysphoria, but if you work with them, it usually gets resolved by the time they get to be about 16 or 18 years old, and things begin to level out. But what people are doing is they're bringing 12-year-olds in, and they're starting them on a path that the science is beginning to say is irreversible. Because if you block puberty, you're never going to get puberty back. You're never going to be able to go through puberty when you're 30 years old. And so this idea that somehow all this is reversible and it's safe, it's not panning out that way in parts of Europe where they're about 10 years ahead of us. In fact, one of the large clinics in Britain is about to be under a class action lawsuit by maybe as many as 1,000 young adults who were transitioned, so to speak. And they say, it's irreparable harm to me. I didn't know. I was a child. I couldn't make that decision. And you have harmed me irreparably. And so they've stopped doing the procedures over there. And I think it's just a matter of time before all that blows up over here.
Well, I certainly hope so. And you mentioned it is trending. We are seeing this anytime that I open up social media, Facebook, Instagram, I'm seeing topics surrounding this issue. We now have an administration that supports it, that says children should be able to change their gender as young as elementary kids. Like you said, this seems like common sense, when before we've always really protected children. And at 8 and 10, it has been common knowledge to say, regardless of what your beliefs are, hey, you know what, you're just a kid. Let's help you, let's guide you. But now it is just, it seems like not only is common sense out the window, this seems very insidious
Mhm.
and wrong. I don't know
Well,
how else to explain it.
here's what one of the psychiatrists said to us. The psychiatrist said many times it's the parent that has the problem more
Mhm.
so or as much as the child, because the parent says, wow, I get all this attention because my child is transitioning, and
Yeah.
it becomes this social media kind of thing. And I'm never going to say that children, nobody has gender dysphoria, gender
Right.
issues and all that. That's real. That's
Yeah.
very real. But putting them on puberty blockers and hormones and, oh my, even surgery while they're a child, no, we don't need to go there. We need to help them work through those problems. And many times the parent is as much the problem as the child, unfortunately.
Let's talk about going back to the SAFE Act. I believe Representative Robin Lundstrom, she's such a
Mhm.
warrior. She sponsored this bill. You
Right?
mentioned that this was the first in the country that protected children.
Yes.
Do you see any other similar laws across the country?
The only state that has done a law similar to the one here is Alabama, and theirs is in court also. Now, that creates an interesting possibility. Let's just assume that maybe the Alabama law gets struck down by their circuit, and maybe the Arkansas law gets upheld eventually by the Eighth Circuit, which is pretty conservative. Then you have a split in the circuits, and that would be a possibility then for it to go on up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I think we're going to see this issue in court for a long time. And I think ultimately it's going to have to be decided at a high level among the courts around the country. And then you have mixed in with that is all of the politically correct, social, trendy stuff. I mean, the Waltons came out
Yeah.
and said, "Oh, we're going to help all the LGBT transgender issues, and we're going to give $1 million to all that." So you have them weighing in. You have social media and just the mass media, and then you have the science coming in here. People are like, "No, no, no! I don't want to hear the science because it doesn't fit the narrative." In fact, the closure of these programs in Europe have hardly made a blip in the news over here in the United States. And yet internationally, it's big news. But over here, it's like we don't even want to talk about that. But we
Right.
need to, because what they have found over there is when they start trying to turn little boys into girls and girls into boys, there are a number of physical and psychological problems that they never anticipated. They have put a halt on this and said, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. And in fact, the FDA just put a warning label on puberty blockers
I saw that.
and said these can cause tumor-like things to form in a child's brain if you give them these. So they put a warning label on those just recently. And so the science is building that we should not be doing this. And uh, it's kind of funny, common sense already told us that, didn't it? That we
Yeah.
should not be doing this to little kids. And finally, we have to have science to back up what everybody knows. But hey, if the science backs it up, that's a good thing, which it does.
Yeah. Well, talk to us then. So parents are watching, viewers, and they are thinking, okay, well, is there anything I can do? What can I do? Or they maybe have kids in
Mhm.
schools where there are particular DEI plans, and this gender issue is woven throughout, or maybe their teacher has that one particular book. It's called "My Shadow is Pink."
Right,
Um,
right.
what can parents and community members do in the meantime?
Need to ask a whole bunch of questions about what's going on over at the school building. Lots of questions.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, schools and institutions are like, no, we don't want to tell you what's going on. But I'll tell you straight up, if it's funded by the government, there's this wonderful tool called the Freedom of Information Act. and you can request all kinds of information that the school is doing, because guess what? They're doing it with your tax dollars. And you have a legal right to know that. And you have a moral right and responsibility to know what the school is doing with your child. Check what kind of curriculum that they're doing. See what they're doing in health class. Find out if they're bringing in outside speakers from Planned Parenthood and places like that to try to talk about gender issues. On and on. Just ask a lot of questions of what goes on. And let me tell you this, I was a school teacher for 11 years. Do not assume that because somebody tells you, oh, our schools are great here, it's those other schools in some other town. No, this is a systemic problem in, I believe, every school in the state of Arkansas. That's how I would approach it. I would approach it as if there's already a problem there. I just got to find it, rather than, oh, there's probably no problem here because, you know, we're all good people here in our community. Well, there are a lot of misled good people at school, and you need to be aware that that's probably the case.
That's great advice, I know, for many parents who are wanting to do something.
Mhm.
Jerry, thank you so much for joining us. We always really appreciate you, and again, all of the work that you guys do down in Little Rock.
Well, we appreciate the work that you guys do in getting the word out, and it's always a pleasure to be on the show with you.
Hope to have you on again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.